Are you in a band? Are you an entertainment entrepreneur? Are you a musician, songwriter, or producer? Or are you wanting to start a career in the music industry? If so, then this podcast is for you. On the Do That Music Thing podcast, we'll be interviewing subject matter experts, artists, and other leaders in the music industry to identify actionable strategies to move you forward in your career, spark some inspiration, and at the least just have some fun talking about music. So let's get to it and do that music thing. And now, a quick word from our sponsors. We all know the music business ain't easy, but it is simple. Learn exactly how simple making a plan can be from The Connector, Chris Keaton. This award-winning song plugger, management consultant, Recording Academy, and North Carolina Music Hall of Fame member can help you move the needle on your career. Email Chris at chriskeaton.com or visit his website at www.chriskeaton.com for more information. And now, back to the show. Good morning and welcome to another episode of the Do That Music Thing podcast, where we are talking with anyone and everyone in the music industry, from artists, managers, producers, anyone in the music industry making waves and moving their careers forward. And today I have an incredible guest, the one, the only, Jim Ivins. Jim, how you doing, buddy?
Dude, I'm so great, Chris. Thank you so much for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. And Jim is a part of the wonderful, amazing, kick-ass rock and roll band, the Ivins, which now I am proud to call them the internationally touring.
Yes, of course.
Which we'll definitely get into, but there's so much that you do, Jim. I know that you are an incredible mind just about music. You're wonderful to follow on Twitter, on social. You're an incredible vocalist, guitarist. You also put on Grunge Nights here in Nashville. And before we get too far into all that stuff, I want to hear about your journey. I want to hear about how you came into music and how it got to where you are today.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much for having me. This is fun, man. I love talking about this with guys like you who are also incredible vocalists, songwriters, and performers and everything. So, always nice to talk a little shop. So my name is Jim Ivins, and I am from Richmond, Virginia. And my brother and I, as you said, we play in a band called the Ivins. And my brother and I were kind of genetically predisposed to play music. Not only is our dad a worship leader, so, a vocalist and a guitar player, he's been playing in bands since he was in high school. So for me as a guitar player, there was always a guitar just like lying around the house. In addition to that, our cousin's name is Bill Leverty, and he is the guitar player in Firehouse. And for those who know, whether you do or not, I'm going to tell you, Firehouse, big melodic hard rock band, sold 8 million records. They beat Alice in Chains and Nirvana for the best new hard rock band at the American Music Awards the year Nevermind came out. They, had a couple of really big singles that still get played on the radio, particularly XM, pretty much a daily basis. Don't Treat Me Bad, All She Wrote, Love of a Lifetime, When I Look Into Your Eyes. And, seeing our cousin, just explode when we were little kids, he'd fly into Christmas Eve having, just been just selling out shows in Japan. And he comes in, he's got the hair and the leather pants and everything. And we are just sitting there following this guy around like, huh? Like, that's our cousin. And so from then on, my brother and I, we were just like, okay, well, that's what we want to do. And, the guys in Firehouse were always pretty smart, and they were always very dedicated. Some around them would say that, maybe they weren't as, as cool as, Motley Crue, but, it's really because they were just so dedicated and so focused. And anytime somebody asked them, how they got here and what they wanted to be doing, they always said the term career musicians. And that is something that always stuck with Jack and I. And so that's just what we wanted to be, no matter how we did it, whether it was, performing, writing, recording, managing, whatever it is, I knew that I always just wanted to be a career musician. And so ever since I was about 14, my life has pretty much revolved around where's the next song? Where's the next show? Where's the next album? You know, who do I need to email today? You know, now it's what post do I need to make? You know, what do I got to do? And that's pretty much been my brain for a while. So, you know, I came up in the music scene in Richmond, Virginia. You know, Richmond is always well known for its punk and hardcore scene that kind of was born out of DC. So a lot of notable bands from Richmond are Veil and Strike Anywhere and Amberetta and Lamb of God and Gwar and Municipal Waste. And so it was always bands like that. And I grew fascinated by music like that when I was a teenager. And again, that just, when I started going to these shows as a teenager, I was like, wow, man, this like live music is so fucking cool. And, you know, so, you know, I grinded it out in Richmond for a long time. And then I moved to New York City in 2012, tried to make it up there through 2014. We can get in depth on this if you want, but, you know, started getting some, you know, manager, lawyer, label attention while we were up there. And, you know, long story short, none of that worked out. But then went back to Richmond for a little while. And then I moved to Nashville, lived there for 6 years. And that's where we met. And now I am, about a year ago, I moved back to Richmond. So, you know, I come to Nashville from time to time. But yeah, no, now I'm back here where it all began in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, that's awesome. I totally forgot that Lamb of God is from the area, and I'm a huge Lamb of God fan. Huge.
Awesome. The best.
Definitely not the type of music that I play.
Oh, I mean,
definitely. There's no way. I can't do that with.
Oh, absolutely not.
What do they call Randy? The grizzly bear of metal?
Yeah, must be. It's funny. I was getting a new tattoo about 2 weeks ago, and Randy walked in while I was getting it.
Crazy guys.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. You go to New York. You have this experience with, you know, management and labels. It's an experience that a lot of artists have, and it doesn't pan out a lot of the times. It didn't pan out for, you know, 3 of the acts that I was in. And we got so close. We got so close
to getting in the game. Yeah.
But, you know, that's where a lot of people, I think, turn away. And a lot of artists really kind of get that first big, you know, knock off the horse, and they never get back up. So how did you come to terms with that, and how did you pick yourself back up?
Sure. So, you know, I'll hit the bullet points here. I'll try and keep it concise, or else we'll be talking for about 4 hours. But, you know, it all started. So, you know, you got to think. So this is, you know, we'll call it 2013. So this was during, you know, what people call the blog era. So it's kind of the very, very end of it. But, you know, this is when blogs, you know, were kind of a big deal. Like if you got written up on enough blogs, you know, you crowd the Google search results, and, you know, all of a sudden people start to take notice, and some blogs were really popular. And we, at the time, were known as the Jim Ivins Band. We were kind of more a kind of like acoustic-y, but like Goo Goo Dolls, Gin Blossoms-y, pop rock kind of a thing. And we got featured on a blog called Kings of A&R. And I had no idea, you know, if that was going to do anything. And sure enough, the next day, we got hit up by this attorney out of Mississippi. And I'll say his name here. I have nothing bad to say about him. His name is Marty Frascona. And he kind of touted himself as being like the indie musician's lawyer. And so he represented a bunch of nobodies like me, but he had one big client, and it was 21 Pilots. And he had gotten them their record deal, and he, you know, he was their guy. By the time we started really getting into working together, they moved on to somebody else because they were about to, you know, become the biggest group in America. But when we started talking to him, you know, their first album had come out, starting to make some noise. I ended up seeing them open for Fall Out Boy in an arena. And so we're like, all right, this is like a real music industry guy who like is into us. In fact, I'm actually going to stick a pin in this story because I forgot. There's actually a wrinkle before this even happened because so before this, so that was like summer 2013. And about like winter, spring of 2013, you know, I'm up there, we're opening up for, people at like Webster Hall, we're opening for like Rooney, which was pretty fun. And we're getting written up in the Aquarian, which is like this big, legendary rock magazine up in there. And I'm kind of submitting stuff online a lot, as you do, because this is also the era where, there are all these music websites where like, hey, submit to this, pay $10 and you submit to this opportunity where you might get a song on Gossip Girl, which I did. And I submitted, there was a label, forget it, I'll say their name. No, I won't, because I'm going to say something bad. So there we go. I'll just say they were a small indie label that was under 88 Warner Brothers, and their head of marketing had heard our record and she really, really liked it. And so I start trying to connect with this person, and I do what everyone does when they see someone they like. I stalked her on Facebook, and so I found out kind of where, there were a couple like, record company events that like she was going to. So I was like, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just pop in and be like, oh, I was just like hanging out here tonight. That's so funny. I ran into you, just to kind of keep myself in her head. Because we had like exchanged, emails, and we talked on the phone like one time, and she was really interested in seeing us play, and there was all that. So we kind of start chatting, and conversations are going pretty positively. And then I remember a guy that I used to work with here in town, who was a music manager. He came up to New York to visit one day, and I start telling him this story, and he's like, "Sorry, what was her name?" And I say her name, and he's like, "I went to Full Sail with her." I was like, no way, that is completely insane. He's like, 1 second, sends one text. 10 minutes later, he's like, we're all going out for drinks tonight. So I go out for drinks with this woman from this label, and we start talking about career. And Michael had been like my manager here in Richmond, and I leave drinks, and I get a text from him. And he's like, you're gonna get a deal offered to you on Monday. And I'm like, oh my god, I did it! Like, I've only been in New York a year. Like, how? Like, I did it! Oh my god! And so she was like, great, you're all set. Like, we're going to move forward. All that's going to happen now, you're just going to meet with the president of the label, and then that's it. You just have like, and we're like, awesome. This is so easy. Like, why? It should always be this easy, right? And we meet with this, and we start to meet with this guy, and he moves the time of this meeting about 8 times. And after about the 5th time, my brother and I are like, all right, what's going on with this guy? Like, this is starting to feel a little weird. Finally, we get on the phone with him, and we think this is going to be like this joyous welcome to the family phone call, and we're going to start making plans, and we're going to make a record, and blah blah blah. And it was the exact opposite of that. It was a total ambush. This guy proceeded to berate us for about 45 minutes. It was clear he had no idea who we were, had not listened to a note of our music, just was getting really bothered with this phone call. And he just starts quoting these astronomical numbers that like he can't possibly consider even thinking about us, because you're not selling 5 digits of records a year, and you're not selling 500 to 1,000 tickets every time you go play. Mind you, the event that I went to for his label was in a room about the size of this bedroom that I'm currently in, and the only people that were there were me and like 5 employees, but never mind that. But and so my brother and I are like texting each other. We're like, all caps, like, what is going on? And so finally, after just going on and on and on about all the things that like we should be doing, we said, well, if we could do all that, then why do we need you? And he didn't really have an answer for us. And so phone call ends, and our hearts have just been ripped out and thrown into the East River. And about a day or two later, I hear from the girl, and she's like, oh my god, Jim, I am so sorry. I had no idea that it was going to go like that. Like, this was totally my fault. I'm so sorry, but your deal's dead in the water. I'm like, awesome. So like 2 months later, the lawyer thing happens. So we start working with him. We start making a record, and we got about 4 songs in. And at first, he had actually had some interesting ideas about how to build up our name and get us in front of people, because again, this is 2013, 2014. It is the worst time in the history of recorded music to be a rock band. So some people, you work hard enough, and not everybody gets it, but some people get the shot. You know, that's what all of us are always working towards. You know, everyone's working towards getting the shot. And even though it might not have been true for years and years at this point, again, I've been at it since, 2005. This is 2014. Everything just kind of felt like it was always building to something. And so when you meet with this label, it goes away, you kind of think, oh, maybe it's over. But then 2 months later, we meet with this lawyer, and we're like, oh, well, it's still doing it. Maybe it's really building to something. And we get about 4 songs into making this album, and he had some ideas about like, well, maybe we could like get you partnered up with like Red Bull athletes. Maybe we get your music to Red Bull, because then at that time, like, the music industry still just had no idea what to do, and so like companies were starting to form record labels, and so Red Bull had a record label, and Mountain Dew had a record label, and Yamaha had a record label. It was just kind of these brands were going to see if maybe they could do it. I think AWOL Nation might have been on Red Bull Records at some point. And so they were going to try and, brand us with, athletes and everything. And before he could even do that, he heard the songs on this album, and he was like, scratch all that. Like, you guys deserve a record deal. Like, you worked hard enough. Like, we're getting it. And this is going to happen. And we're just like, oh my God, we did it. And so I remember, I'll never forget, he told us, he was like, all right, make a list of like 20 labels that you like, and we're going to pitch you to all of them. And we ain't going over 20. There's no way. And we're like, okay. And this is where we got our first crash course in the modern music business, because the conversations would tend to go something like this. He would pitch us to say, Atlantic, or, Fuel by Ramen, or, Matador, or what have you. He'd have a conversation with someone. They'd be like, oh, this is fantastic. I love this. Let's talk again in 2 weeks. He would call us and be like, guys, you'll never believe the conversation I just had. I had it with this guy. We're talking again in 2 weeks. Like, it's going to be great. We're like, awesome. Talks again in 2 weeks, calls the guy back, and he's like, all right, moving forward with the Ivins deal, right? And the guy's like, oh, you didn't think I could actually sign that band, did you? He's like, well, what are you talking about? And he's like, they don't have enough social media followers. What the hell am I supposed to do with that? He's like, but you said you love the music. He's like, well, that doesn't matter. It's like, and we went over 20. There were some that just said no, but it was the overwhelming majority went just like that. And so we kind of were dead in the water again. And that's when a friend of my dad's, his name is Sam Taylor. Sam Taylor is a record producer out of Texas. His claim to fame was Third Day and King's X. Sam has known my dad since they were 6th graders. So dad tells him this story, and he's like, well, I have a friend who maybe could, just give him some guidance or something like that. And he says to my dad, I'm going to talk to this friend of mine. And my dad tells me the story. And I said, oh, well, who's his friend? And he says, his name's Michael Kaplan. And I say, well, I know who that is. He's like, well, how do you know who that is? I'm like, he signed Firehouse. I'm like, really? And dad's like, really? And I'm like, yes. And mind you, they have my cousin and this person have no connection to each other at all. I don't even think they'd met. So it was just a very weird, serendipitous thing where, to me, I was like, that's interesting. And so Sam goes and talks to Michael, and Sam's like, all right, can you send me those songs that you were working on? And, we send him, and he calls back, and he's like, hey, Michael really liked your songs. I was like, oh, that's very nice. He's like, no, he like really liked them. I was like, oh, that's very cool. And he's like, well, he'd like to meet you. He wants to take you out to dinner in New York. I'm like, the steakhouse dinner, the one that everybody talks about. Like, no way. Like, this guy, I mean, he was the head of A&R at Sony for like 30 years. I mean, this is the biggest person we have ever spoken to. And so I'm like, oh my God, I did it. I did it again. I'm like, here we go. 3rd time's a charm, baby. Let's do this thing. And so, long story long, Michael ends up being our manager for a couple of years at that point. I end up moving back to Virginia because Michael thought that it would be cooler for us to break out of Virginia because it's so infrequent that anybody breaks out of Virginia, like on a big scale. Because when you think about big scale artists from Virginia, it's like Dave Matthews Band, Lamb of God, and like Pharrell. So it's like the most random assortment of people have made it out of here. And then you have a bunch of bands that I like to call bridesmaids. They're always the bridesmaid, never the bride. They got like, they got a little juice. You got your Crackers and Seven Mary 3 and Everything and Parachute and May, which are bands that like most people will be like, oh yeah, I think I remember that band, right? They had that one thing, right? But it's not like, Dave Matthews Band. So we went back to Virginia. And this whole time, we're making this album called the Code Duello, which eventually did come out. And we're getting shopped, and we're running into a lot of the same hurdles that we ran into with Marty when he was representing us. And so after about a year of this, Michael says, well, we need to bring in a co-manager because Michael was on the we were basically a science experiment for him because he had been on the label side his entire career. He'd never managed anybody. It was us and this one kid out of San Francisco that he was being like, I'm going to try this out. And so he was like, well, we need to bring in someone that's been around the block. And so he ends up bringing in a guy named Larry Mazer. And Larry Mazer had represented Kiss. He had represented Cinderella, Newfound Glory, Breaking Benjamin, and then very crucially to us, he represented a band called Conditions and Lamb of God, both of whom are from Richmond. So we looked at Larry as someone who understood us. There's a place here that, we played a million times called the Canal Club. And I'm like, Larry's been to the Canal Club. He's from New Jersey, but he's been to the Canal Club. Like, he understands who we are. I think this is going to be a great fit. So again, kind of felt serendipitous. And so, again, I'll say names here just because this company doesn't even exist anymore. Larry brought Razor and Tie Records in, and he was like, I have already had 3 conversations with them. The deal is all but signed. And we're like, well, we haven't even met Larry in person yet. Like, we've only spoken to him on the phone. And he's like, I want to meet with you guys. It's going to be Memorial Day weekend. I will bring you your record contract. And we're like, holy shit. Like, that's an insane thing to hear from somebody. And so he comes down and we have a lot of talking, and he's like, with the holiday weekend, we just, I couldn't get it from them, but it's going to happen next week. So a week goes by, and another week, and another week. And finally, we're like, hey, dude, like, I'm dying over here. Like, what's going on? And he's like, at the 11th hour, Razor and Tie passed because they didn't know what to do with you. Because you guys don't fit into this cute little box. Because if you listen to our music, it's a little bit of this, it's a little bit of that. It's not quite that over there. I just call it cool, loud, alternative rock music. But people like labels and managers don't like ambiguity. So they were like, well, you don't sound like, I don't know, Memphis Mayfire, some band, like somebody that's, when you say that name, you're like, I know exactly what these guys sound like. And so apparently their radio guy had vetoed us at the last second because he was just like, I don't know what am I going to sell? Who am I going to sell this to? And so he was like, don't worry about it. Like, I've, gotten a million record deals in my lifetime. Like, we're going to get you another one before the end of the summer. Summer goes by, and then Larry quits because he says, guys, I've been in this business for 35 years, and I have never in my entire career been more shell-shocked or disheartened by a record shopping process than I have with you. And I'm like, well, I'm so glad we made history for you. He's just like, I thought we had a slam dunk of an album, and since I can't get you guys a deal because we're not going to have any major label backing, you guys are still a baby band, there's nothing I can do for you. So he quits. I'll tell one last thing before I get to Nashville, and I'll stop talking for 45 minutes. We stayed with Michael for about another year, and right at the end of that, we were pretty much parting ways. We all just kind of gotten pretty fried. A couple other things happened that I don't need to go into, but finally, an investor here in Richmond got interested in us. He was a guy, he'd made a fortune of money in the direct mail business. And he had this guy, this musician here in town, and he just funded all of his music projects. like he literally bought them onto a tour with Orgy one time, and he bought them a bus. Like it was just like crazy stuff like that. And so Jack and I start playing in an Alice in Chains tribute band here in Richmond with this guy. And this investor, sees the band and he's like, who are those two gingers? And we start talking. We tell him we have a band. We give him our record, and he's like, "Oh my God, this record is unbelievable. You're telling me you guys got shopped with this album twice?" And I'm like, "Yes." And every label in the music business has said no. He's like, "Well, I tell you what, I want to throw some money into this operation." And we're like, "That's very interesting." And so at the time, every now and then something about tour buy-ons had come across our desk, and we were very I don't really like that. Number one. Number two, we don't have nearly the amount of money that it would take to do one that would actually be worthwhile. I remember, we'd get stuff like, "Hey, you guys could open for Chevelle," or I'm like, "Okay, well, we get, curb stomped if we open for Chevelle because we're not heavy enough." And then, or it'd be like, "Or you guys could open for Simple Plan or something." I'm like, "Well, we're just not compatible. Like, what are you talking about?" It'd always be random stuff like that. And so Jack actually had this idea. There's a band called Highly Suspect, and this is 2016. So they had already got nominated for a Grammy, but they hadn't like really popped off yet, but they were on the rise. And Jack was like, "I think that we actually would be a really good fit for Highly Suspect. I wonder if we could buy onto their tour." And Michael goes, "I know their manager." And we're like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll send him an email right now." That afternoon, we get it confirmed, and it's like, "Yeah, we can do that." We set a rate that we felt was reasonable. They're like, "Yeah, you guys want to open the West Coast run?" And we're like, "Are you kidding?" We're like, "Yes." But at the time, we told them yes before this investor had agreed to invest in us. So we were in a bit of a pickle, and we're like, "Okay, we just agreed to something that we had no business agreeing to, but we can fix this. We'll just book a show. We'll just book a show real quick, and he'll see how great we are. And bada bing, bada boom, we're gonna go on tour with Highly Suspect." And our band quits. So we are without a guitar player and a bass player, but we still had this show booked, and we're like, we have to do it because we got to get this investor guy to give us his money. And we scrounge up two guys who we'd never played with before. Ironically, one of them is Hatton Taylor, who became our guitar player. But he never played with us before, and we never got to really rehearse. We had like one rehearsal, and our songs are very vocal heavy, so they require a lot of harmonies, and nobody was singing. And we played the worst show we have ever played in our entire life. It was a train wreck. The investor left before the set was over. I did not get a text from him, so I texted him the next day. I was like, "Hey man, like, it's great to see you last night. Sorry you had to dip. What are we thinking?" And about 8 hours go by, and I get a text that just says, "Hey Jim, great to see you. I will be reevaluating my investments at this time. Like, thank you." And I never heard from him again. So at that point, we decide we need a reset, and that's where we landed in Nashville. And then we kind of had to start from the ground up, but eventually, my brother is just a networking machine, and we started Grunge Night in 2018, and it started to get pretty popular. And because we noticed that tribute shows were becoming very popular. Brandon Bruce with King Thrust, he was doing shows. Tyson had Rare Hair, obviously, and there was Loud Jams, and then Joko was doing stuff a little bit. But that was kind of it. And we kind of saw, based on, Brandon had thrown a Chris Cornell tribute show right after he died. And I went, and it was like sold out at Basement East. And I was like, okay, there's clearly a thirst for grunge music, because I love grunge music. I came up on grunge music, and no one was doing, the Rare Hair for grunge music. And so we thought, well, maybe we could do that. And so over time, it grew and grew and grew, and Grunge Night 8 this past January sold out Basement East, and we had Chris Daughtry and Hailstorm.
It's a very similar story, but what I love about your story, and what I feel people can take away from it is that you're going to be presented with opportunity.
Yes.
And that opportunity is more than likely going to fall apart just because of the nature of the business.
Absolutely.
But turning that opportunity into another opportunity, into another opportunity, into another opportunity, I think is what separates people who are career musicians, as you said, from people who are not.
People who are hobbyists, as our one-time manager so lovingly said to us that our bandmates were. He was like, we got to get rid of those guys. They're hobbyists. Which we thought was such a savage burn. And I've never heard anybody say that word before. But, I have to tell you, for the longest time, and not only, just kind of the thirst to, be a career musician and, this is all I ever wanted to do. After a while, our strategy was just to outlast everybody. It was really just be the last one standing. Like, eventually something has to work, right? And you still got to bring the goods, which I thought we did, but that was kind of the thinking for a while. It was just like, well, we can't just stop. Like we gotta, you just gotta keep going. And I remember that long rant that I just gave you. I told to a guy who was a manager in Nashville, and I remember he hears that story and he pauses for a second. And he just goes, why are you still doing this? And he's like, no, I don't mean like you suck or anything. I'm just like, why are you continuing to torture yourself with the music business? Any sane, strong person at this point would have quit years ago and no one would have faulted them for it. Like, how are you still doing this? And I was like, I don't know, man. I don't really know how to do much of anything else. So you just kind of have to take your licks and keep going.
People will continuously tell me, like, why do you keep doing this? I'm like, well, I like it. I mean, regardless of any of the negativity, I think, that comes along with it. Now, do people have a very skewed perception of what the music industry is? Oh, 1,000%. People would say, oh man, what's it like going on tour? Is it just parties? And I'm like, if by parties you mean 6 people in a van who haven't showered for a week, 2 weeks, eating nothing but horrible fast food, just we play for 40 minutes, then drive for 4 hours, and then do that again. And then, have you ever spent 9 hours in a Panera Bread before? I have. But the perception aside, yeah, there's an interesting thing where people just have this very skewed idea about what it is to be in the music industry. But when it comes down to it, I know it's a cliche kind of viewpoint, but I mean, I just love making records. I love making music.
Absolutely. If you didn't like doing it, I mean, you would never withstand, the years of rejection that it takes, because a career in the arts, man, I mean, it is 1 in a million. It's just like, you've got to get used to hearing no all the time. I mean, when you think about success stories and everything, I always like to think of it like you have to win the lottery 3 times. You have to win the lottery to get your foot in the door. Then you have to win the lottery to have success. And then you have to win the lottery again to have sustained success. And the odds of winning the lottery once are astronomical enough. So the odds of winning the lottery all 3 times, like, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And the amount of artists that, I mean, and they're very lucky that they get to do this, but you think that, a lot of artists have about 2, maybe 5 years, if they're lucky, of like top level success. And then you dine off that for the rest of your career, because it's almost impossible to remain the thing for longer than 2 to 5 years. You just can't do it, especially now with how fast music works. Remember like 5 years ago, there was that song Trap Queen by Fetty Wap? Like, who's talking about Fetty Wap nowadays? That was like the biggest song ever. Like, it just happens.
So what do you think about the state of music? Now, real quick, I will let people know that before Jim and I got on this podcast, we talked for 40 minutes in depth about probably everything we've already talked about. So we've kind of gotten our yayas out, but I want to talk and I want to find out about, Jim, what is your view of specifically rock music? What's working and what's not working?
I am a very big proponent of things that are new. and things, genre evolutions that can push the game forward. Because to me, growing up in the 90s and going into the 2000s was such an exciting period because the genre went through so many permutations. And it's not like I feel like, all right, you've been here a couple of years, like get out. Like, it's just like, I think music is most exciting when artists evolve and when genres evolve. And so, like, to me, there's nothing more boring than a band making the same record over and over and over again. Some people don't care. Like, look, I love AC/DC, but let's be honest, they've spent their entire career making the exact same album. More modern example, I love New Found Glory, but with one, maybe two exceptions, they have made the exact same album for their entire career. And a lot of bands, are happy to do that. I mean, Nickelback's a great example. I will willingly admit, I like Nickelback. I think Chad Kroeger can write a damn good song, but they have made the same album for their entire career, and they do it with a smile on their face. But to me, it is much more interesting to see an ebb and flow in rock music. And let's take it from 1990. 1990, bands like Firehouse are still top of the heap. Firehouse and Winger and Slaughter and Warrant and everything. Then you go through this, and then you got Nirvana and Alice in Chains and Stone Temple Pilots and Soundgarden. But then after that, you go Gin Blossoms, Hootie and the Blowfish, and it moves into, Korn and Limp Bizkit and bands like Deftones. And then it moves into Godsmack and Seether. And then kind of congruently with that, you have Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance and Paramore. And, you already had Blink, leading up to that. And what has made me most upset is that kind of feels like where things just kind of come to a screeching halt in about 2008, 2009. It seems like the industry had run out of ideas, and instead of investing in the wide, breadth of artists that are out there making cool music that takes the genre forward, it's kind of felt like, something that we talked about offline, kind of felt like the industry saw, well, this kind of Midwestern post-grunge thing, that kind of seems to work. So let's just keep doing that. And to diminishing returns. And then one could call this an evolution, but I almost call it a betrayal. What is then presented to consumers in the mid 2010s as rock music is Lumineers and Imagine Dragons and 21 Pilots and bands like that. And you have rock fans who are like, okay, no, I still want to rock, but like, I mean, we don't have to go all the way over here, like, I mean, I still want to, hear something cool, and so I got very excited towards, we'll call it like 2018, 2019, when what was starting to emerge, there was a wide range of artists that were starting to kind of get bigger, kind of on the way that rock used to be, like true alternative culture, because it was outside the traditional systems. And so you had a band like Greta Van Fleet, you had a band like Ghost, you had the 1975, you had the Struts, and you have even a guy like Jelly Roll, you have these artists that are all from totally different parts of the spectrum, still under the rock banner, doing cool things that haven't been the norm for a while. And that's what always makes me the most excited, when bands like that can get some shine. And so I think there are some really cool things happening in rock music right now. As much of a pop punk fan as I am, I'm not the biggest fan of this pop punk revival. I think it is, look, I will say this. I went to When We Were Young in Vegas last fall. It was unbelievable. I had the best time. But it was because I was going to see Census Fail and AFI and My Chemical Romance and, Bring Me the Horizon and everything. But there hasn't been anybody in that space offering something new that makes me excited. Like, because every now and then, as pop punk was bigger in the early 2000s, there would be bands who had little twists on it that I thought were very cool. And a band like My Chemical Romance is a great example of that. A band, a much smaller example that I felt went under the radar is a band called Hit the Lights. They started down tuning their guitars a bit and making things a little heavier, but it still felt fresh in that sandbox. And so when I get into a rock band, I'm really excited by ones who can take something that make a little deviation, and all of a sudden it turns into something where you're like, oh, well, they kind of sound like, well, not exactly this band. Well, they kind of sound a little like this, like, I don't know. And that's always what I tried to do with my music, the music of the Ivins. I always tried to write songs that gave a listener a feeling of familiarity, that, kind of made them feel safe. Like, oh, this isn't, too challenging, but I can't quite put a finger on a band that they sound like, you know what I mean? And that's what makes me most excited with new rock music.
It's always kind of an interesting Achilles heel that you hear people talking about, where you're talking with an industry person and you're a rock band, and they were like, well, you don't sound enough like this. And then you have a conversation with the next person. Well, you sound too much like this person. There's this weird shuffling that goes back and forth. And once again, it's art, so it's clearly subjective.
Absolutely.
But, we went through that a ton.
Absolutely.
In the band Blackwater James, where we were like half Guns N' Roses, half like Godsmack. We got put in a really weird, place, and no one knew what.
With a little swagger.
I like that. Should have used that.
Yeah. By the way, make no mistake, I love those bands. I hope you did not take offense when I started talking about post-grunge bands. I was not talking about you.
No. You're fine. But yeah, like there was a lot of that. We don't know what to do with you, and I always felt like, well, isn't that kind of a good thing? Like
dude, you and me, man, we're like this. I'm telling you.
But there's that uniqueness in how much. I mean, you said it though. You want that little differentiation, right?
You don't have to go full Radiohead on us, but just just a little, something. Take a little bit of sugar from this side and throw it in the recipe.
So, how much do you feel this, democratization of the recording process, the democratization of the distribution process, and social media access to fans, immediate access? How do you feel about that in regards to rock music? Do you feel like people are really utilizing it like other genres are? Or, how do you see this kind of playing out long term?
So as with everything, I think there are two sides of this coin across a multitude of issues. So I'll address them one by one. So first off, you talked about the democratization of recording. So one, I do think that's great. For instance, during the pandemic, I made a record called Quarantines, which I thought was a really clever title. And then I realized like 100 other people did it. But basically I did it as a way, because everybody was locked down and I wanted to bring people together kind of the way that we do with Grunge Night. And I was like, well, how do I do that on a record? And so what I did was, because I was, in lockdown like everybody, I wrote a bunch of songs. They were a bunch of different styles. And I was able to say, okay, who do I know in my wild network of people in Nashville? Who do I think would fit best on these songs? And so it was really exciting to kind of go through this big Rolodex that, we've accumulated over time and be like, oh, I think you would be cool to play guitar on this, and you'd be cool to play drums on this, and you'd be cool to play bass on this. So there's over 60, musicians and engineers on this record that I'm so proud of. And that was only possible because everyone had to record at home, even the drummers, I had to be really specific about who I picked, because I would use their social media to see, well, who has a space with microphones set up that could do this, that doesn't require having to get a studio with an extra engineer. You have to freak people out, about wearing masks and everything, and people can just do it at home. So I would pick drummers that way. It was one, I thought they were right for the song, but two, do they have a way to do it? And so what I would do then is I relied on competent, really accomplished mixers to take all these home recordings and plug them in. And, the record sounds amazing because at-home recording has made it possible. And now I got so used to recording my vocals in a way that I can stand next to the computer and edit and, do a billion takes without making an engineer want to shoot himself, Now I'm like, well, that's the only way I want to do it. Like, I don't want to record my vocals any other way. And so that way, I think it's fantastic. The flip side of that is, now anybody thinks they can do it. So you get a flooded stream of, stuff that gets out there, and not only a flooded stream of lower quality music. Obviously music is subjective, but you get a flooded stream of lower quality stuff, but also technology has, while it has allowed us to do so much at home, as with everything, because it's just the way human nature is, it's also gotten so easily abused that now it's to a point where, you got someone whose vocals sound amazing on the record because, they did all the tuning, and granted, look, I use tuning as well, but there's a point, where, and then you realize that they can't sing at all, when they, actually leave the bedroom and go see him live. Same goes for, ripping a insane guitar solo, you punch it note by note, and then you can't play it, live and everything, and that's because of the technology. So there's that. The distribution, I think they all kind of follow the same pattern. I think distribution has gotten so much better over the years. I can remember, years ago, I mean, you had to submit your stuff to CD Baby, months before, you were going to release something, because they just didn't have the quick technology. Now, CD Baby's one of them, but TuneCore, CD Baby, DistroKid, and all this stuff. I mean, we have done this before. I don't, like it that we've done it, but like, there have been times where like things have just dragged out so long, and we set a release date for something, and we uploaded a single to TuneCore the day before it came out, and it came out. Like, it was there. It was on all the streaming services less than 24 hours after I submitted it. Like, that's crazy. The flip side of that is what Spotify quoted some like absolutely insane number where it's like, oh, there's like 160,000 songs upload to Spotify every day. In fact, I might even be missing a decimal point on that one. Like, it's something outrageous. So you're just kind of like, for instance, Spotify has that tool where you can submit to be on editorial playlists. It's like, well, how are you supposed to compete with 160,000 people every day? You know what I mean? It's crazy. There was a third part to your question, but as normal, I rant so long that I forget what it was. Democratization of add-on recording, distribution, and
social media. Social media.
Yes. Okay. I love social media because every now and then I can tweet at a band I love and they'll tweet right back at me. And I think that's fascinating that, I remember, whether I want to, know something about like, hey, what did you, use on, this record, or like, hey, did you play, this or whatever? And someone's like, yeah, we did this. And then it's just like, wow, that's incredible that, you can do that. And I think that kind of taking control of your own image and your brand, and being able to present yourself the way you want to be presented without, having to, take out a small business loan to pay a marketing agency to, get you in front of people. The people who have been able to figure it out, like, I think it's great that they've been able to do that. I do think to part of your question, I now remember, rock definitely has not been able to game social media the way that pop and rap have. Though what's interesting about that, I hear that criticism a lot, and I do agree. As with most people, I don't quite know what the answer is, because a lot of times people are like, oh, well, hip hop, rappers, they just use Instagram just like so much better than, rock artists. And then you go and like look at what using Instagram better than rock artists is, and it's just like someone standing next to a car. It's like, it's nothing groundbreaking. And granted, I'm a huge fan of hip hop. I'm not saying all rappers are, not creative in this particular field. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it's just like, I think it's just a matter of the cultural zeitgeist just has leaned on hip hop and pop so much over the last couple decades that it doesn't really matter what those artists do. It's that they're in potential fans, ecosystem. They are playing what these people want to hear. And I also think demographically, I think studies have shown that, people who are bigger fans of pop and hip hop and probably country to an extent use social media more than the average straight up rock fan, even though, yes, genre doesn't mean anything anymore and people listen to everything, but like, what I'm getting at. So I do think that rock artists have not been able to really figure it out, because, the answer seems to be right now, well, you make a bunch of silly videos and eventually you might go viral. And one, I think it's a crazy strategy. Two, making silly videos, it just takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to do them right. You got to get the right equipment, and you got to know how to use Adobe Premiere, and you got to take hours and hours every day to make these videos. And a lot of people, especially as you get older, like, you just don't have the time, and so, because you have like a job. And so, as with a lot of things in the music industry, a lot of it's a young people game. I'm a ripe 34, so I know that I am not the playing big rock music. I am not the target TikTok demographic. I've still dabbled with making occasional silly video. We put out a record at the end of 2021, and I made a series of probably 6 to 10 silly videos, and I thought they were funny, and I got a lot of compliments from people in Nashville about them. But they take so long. I pretty much just had to ignore my job every day to make them. And my fiance had to listen to me, say stupid things, while I did that. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you asked me if I knew the answer, because I certainly don't. But I think people, because now artists are asked so much more these days. When we were growing up, you just need to focus on writing songs and playing shows. And now you have to be a social media whiz, and you have to be a marketing genius, and you have to know how to edit, and you have to know how to light, you have to know how to take photos, you have to know how to like do all these things. And some people just can't do it, but some people can. And the people who can, those are the ones who are going to rise up and do something really cool that no one's ever thought of before. That's what I think.
So many topics to delve into. So many.
Yeah. Sorry.
So many. No. It's interesting. It really is. When it comes to social media, especially when it's discussed from a demographic perspective, right? I'm a big advocate of, data collection. And sure. When I look into my Spotify analytics, when I look in Facebook analytics, insights for my bands, I'm like, man, that 35 to 55 is making up a huge chunk of that pie.
Yeah, man.
And, there's nothing wrong with that at all. That's especially
35 to 55 people need cool new music too.
Yeah, and they've got arguably more expendable income than.
That's why nostalgia is so big right now, because we finally have money. In the large general sense, but not necessarily me specifically, but people have money.
That's one potential challenge, right? I think with rock music specifically in social media is that you said it, kind of the audience just maybe isn't there, or not there in attention, right? Not there in abundance of attention. While they might be logging on the same amount, they are not engaging the same amount.
Yeah, and they're not engaging in the same ways, because the audience is absolutely there for rock music. It's a bunch of people didn't just evaporate into thin air. You know what I mean? Like the people that were filling arenas, for insert 90s band here, back in the 1990s, like they didn't just go away. Like they're still here, and their kids, are here looking for something like what they had. So it's really just, I think as with everybody, I think it just comes down to trying to find a hook. And, for us, recently, the hook that we tried was we're going to be the first American rock band to ever play in the country of Sudan. Is anyone going to care about that? We'll find out. Let's go. And, you know, that was our last big Hail Mary that, you know, we threw up because, you know, my brother plays in another band called Burn the Ballroom, and they had done a bunch of State Department tours in a bunch of random countries over the last several years. They'd been to Tunisia and Saudi Arabia and Egypt and Tajikistan and Russia. But they never really like did anything with that information. And I always told Jack, I was like, how are you guys not just like telling every, you know, news publication, blog, you know, like whatever, like how are you guys not doing that? And he'd always be like, oh, I don't know, we probably should. And so when we finally got the opportunity to go to Sudan, like that's what I want. I was like, all right, well, I want to give this a shot, you know, because I think that's an interesting story. And so we hadn't been able to crack, you know, the nut on anything. So like maybe this will do it, you know, and that's, you know, that was kind of the impetus behind that.
Well, I know when I saw on Instagram that you guys were going overseas, and then I didn't log on for a while, and then I pick up my, you know, and I was like, wait a minute, there's a lot of sand behind those guys. Where are they? And, I was like, that's such an awesome experience. Let's talk a little bit about the international tour of the Ivins.
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, I left Nashville, you know, like I said, a little over a year ago. And when I left, I was kind of, you know, just putting pause on everything. I was like, you know, I'm fried. Doing this for 20 years. You know, we put out the last Ivins record, and it didn't do what I wanted to do. I put out that Quarantunes record, and it didn't do what I wanted to do. And so I was just like, you know, I can't do this right now. So I was telling everybody, I was like, do not ask me to do anything. I'm not gonna do anything. So let's just take a pause. And then so I moved in like April. That September, we got a call from the State Department because this had happened. We had submitted every year but one that Burn the Ballroom had submitted to get into one of these State Department tours, and we had not gotten in every time, but we got in 2019. And they were like, great, we're going to send you somewhere in 2020. And so that didn't happen. Gets pushed to 2021. They're like, well, world's not really back yet, so let's push it to 22. So I leave, and I forget that conversation ever happened. So in September, they call us, and they're like, hey, we're ready to send you somewhere, and we're going to send you to Sudan. So I hear that, and I go, no, like, absolutely, I'm not doing that. Like, because all I can think is like Darfur and, you know, all these really horrible atrocities like going on. And I'm like, I'm not going there. You out of your mind? Like, and of course, the way our band always works is that two of us always feel one way, and two of us feel the exact opposite way. So Jack and Ray, our bass player, were like, yeah, I don't care. Send me anywhere. Like, what? Sudan? Who cares? Like, yeah, let's go. And me and Hatto were like, could we like speak to somebody at State, you know, before we say yes to this? And so, you know, we talked to somebody, and, you know, eventually it was like, okay, this is the ultimate party trick. Who can ever say I was the first American rock artist to ever play in Sudan? Like, it's such a weird statistic. Like, it's such a curveball that nobody would ever expect to hear from anybody. And so we're like, okay, this is unfinished business. Let's do it. And so say we're going to do it. And I was like, you know, if we are going to do this, then let's, you know, do it for real. So we went back in the studio. We recorded a couple songs. We put one of them out in February. It's called Illusion. We made a very silly music video for that I rather enjoy. I wear a big wig in it. And so, you know, we, you know, ready to do it. And so, you know, March comes around, and, you know, we fly over there. You know, it took about 30 hours to get over there. And the culture shock, you know, it happens right away, man, because so I have been fortunate enough to travel to almost every continent. I hadn't been to South America or Africa. And so I'd never been to Africa before. I'd never been to a third world country before. And, you know, we landed in Egypt before we could go to Khartoum, Sudan. And you leave New York, you know, it's, you know, nothing but buildings and cars and, you know, planes and everything. And 9.5 hours later, you land in Cairo, and you look out that window, it's sand. That's it. Like the city, because the city's on the other side of the airport. So you just look out this window, and I mean, I literally felt it in my chest. I was just like, oh my God, like Dorothy, we ain't in Kansas anymore. I mean, like Toto, we ain't in Kansas anymore, whatever. But it was like, this is wild, man. And so, we flew into Khartoum, and I mean, it's just, it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And unfortunately, now they're in the midst of a civil war, which started mere weeks after we left. So it's horrible, absolutely horrible what's going on over there. But like, we go, and I mean, the first thing that hits you is, there's so many people over there. In Khartoum is the capital of Sudan, and you're out there, and there's roads. They're mostly paved, but I mean, there are no street signs, there are no lines on the roads, there are almost no traffic lights. And the roads are mostly, I'm sure they were built so that like 4 cars would go across, but it usually turns into about 8. And the direction is actually not mandatory. So most cars could go this way, but you might see a couple that are just going this way. And if there is even a centimeter of space available between 2 cars, they're going to take it. And people are, running between the cars and biking between the cars and doing all this stuff. And yet we didn't see one single traffic incident the entire time we were there. Like, they have just got it down. So it was almost like a series of honks. They kind of like, it'd be like 2 honks means one thing, and 1 means one, and 3 quick ones means another thing. And like, it's wild, man. But yeah, so, we land there, and our first show, we were in Sudan for 9 days, and we played 2 official shows, and then we did a couple acoustic things. But our first big show was in this town 9.5 hours away called Atbara. And we were playing outside of a train station because there was a railway worker strike going on, and this show was being put on to like benefit the railway workers. And it was wild because, we get up there. I mean, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, where I would call Atbara almost like a village. I mean, it is, talking about small towns. I mean, like this is a small town. And, we're driving through, and, we leave the hotel because on our schedule, it said that, we were supposed to be on stage at 8 o'clock. And at 8 o'clock, we're like still eating dinner at the hotel. And we're like, oh man, like, is the show like still happening? Are we late? What's going on? They're like, well, let's go over and check it out. And, we're kind of driving through this town. It's at night. There's not a lot of lights. And we're like, man, like, what are we walking into? I mean, is anyone going to be there? I mean, is anyone going to like what we're doing? I mean, like, what's going on? And we walk up, and there are 2,000 people just sitting there staring at an empty stage, waiting for us. And we're like, what? And so, once everything finally comes together, we start playing, and it was very wild because there were kind of some gear kerfuffles that were going on, and so we're at this point, we traveled 30 hours to be there. The next day we drove 9.5 hours up there. It's hot, we're tired, we're disoriented, and they're like, all right, go. And we're opening for a jazz musician and a comedian, and we're like, well, I guess we'll just go now. And we start playing, and it was really interesting because with such a huge audience there outside of this train station, you had some people who were clearly like right away, like, whoa, like, what is that? And, they get their phones out, and, they're filming everything, and, people start, dancing or whatever. And then you get some people, and granted, everyone was the thing that struck us most about the Sudanese people was that everyone is so polite, and everyone is so nice and so gracious and everything. And everyone, just was so wonderful to work with. And there was a big swath of people that were, very politely just kind of sitting there like this. And clearly in their minds were like, what the hell's going on here? These 4 white guys are making a lot of noise on this stage, and I'm here to see a jazz guy. Like, what the hell is this? But, everyone was very, very respectful. I went out on a very big limb and tried to do some crowd work at one point that I knew could fall flat on its face, trying to get some whoa-whoas happening, and they all did it. Like all 2,000 of them, they all did it. And I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. And we got off stage, and we kind of got swarmed going to the van. People swarming us for pictures. It was pretty wild. And so we spent about the next week. We were working with Sudanese students at the College of Music and Drama. We were talking about not only our personal journeys with music, but just the history of American rock music. And we were teaching them about improvisation and songwriting. And we played acoustically. Because I had to play acoustic because the government was rationing power and shutting it off at various parts of the city at various times, and the school got the power shut off. And so we played, and that again, the culture shock is just top to bottom. It is an incredibly humbling experience. But yeah, the second show that we played at the end of the week, it was very funny in that we played in this big park that was in the middle of the city. It was very beautiful, but it was a half abandoned amusement park, and it had very like Crazy Taxi kind of video game level, like you'd think of like a Tony Hawk level would be like the abandoned amusement park. Like that's exactly what this looked like. So we're like driving through, and there's like inoperable Ferris wheels and like tilt-a-whirls and everything. And then there's one of those things, it's almost like I'm not gonna say it's a seesaw, but it's kind of like does like one of these. And because we thought the whole park was abandoned. At one point we're like walking around and we see some people, and they're like, oh, I guess like people are just like chilling in the thing. And then it starts moving, and we're like, wait, this isn't fully abandoned? Like, what's going on? And so when we did the gig, it was just funny to look out on the stage, off the stage, and there's all these people, but then behind them, there's these like amusement park rides. It's like, oh, it's like we're hitting the state fair circuit, except it's for 1,000 people and the U.S. ambassador to Sudan, because that's who was sitting in the front row. It was, and then that night, it was like we were the Beatles when we got off stage. We took pictures with these people for about 2 hours after we got off, and it was an absolutely insane experience. Absolutely insane, and it was cool, to have you work as we've been talking all this time about how hard you work and how long you work and everything, to go to an audience that has never seen anything like this before and has no conception of what you do or how you do it and everything, and to just embrace it the way that they did was really just totally remarkable. And to then take that momentum and go to Egypt, and we did 2 shows in Egypt as well, in Cairo. Very different geographical kind of experience. Cairo, felt like going to LA or Chicago or New York or something. It's just a very big, bustling metropolis. And we played one show that was literally in a coffee shop. So at first we were like, what are we doing playing in this coffee shop for 10 people? But it was a coffee shop that was in what used to be the bunker of the British Embassy, like during the war. So it was like a really cool place to be, because the street that it was on had all these like opulent houses and buildings and everything, because it's where like the embassies used to be. And so then the 10 people that we played for actually really liked it. And so they all came to the gig the next night, that was actually at like a rock club, and they all brought people. So that was really cool to be like, hey, we went to Cairo and we had fans, at the second gig. It's pretty wild, because the thing that seemed to happen in both Sudan and in Egypt was people heard there's an American band playing here. No research. I have to see this. And that was really cool to have people come up to us and tell us that it's like, we just can't believe you're here. We just love that you're here. That's all it comes down to. We just can't believe you came all the way here to play for us, and we just think that's cool. So it was really, really wonderful to hear that. And yeah, once in a lifetime experience, no doubt about it.
Well, how do you top that? So what is next for the Ivins?
What is next for the Ivins? I don't know. We still have one song that we recorded back in November that's in the can. It's a really good song. I hope it comes out. We played it in Africa But yeah, I don't know. I know that, everybody has a lot of their own stuff going on. Ray is on the road every weekend playing with a variety of awesome artists, most of them in country. Jack, last summer he was drumming for Tanya Tucker, which was insane. I went to a casino in rural North Carolina, Cherokee, North Carolina, to go see him play with Tanya Tucker, which is just a wild experience. Then he did some dates with this band When in Rome that have this hit song called The Promise, which is one of those songs that, like, if you played it, you're like, oh yeah, that song. He played a couple gigs with Orianthe and Autograph, and he's playing on the Monsters of Rock cruise, and he does all that stuff. He's doing great stuff as a drummer. And Hatto was playing in an Iron Maiden tribute band for a little while. He's not doing that anymore, but yeah, I mean, because Hatto's our resident metalhead, so he was doing that. But yeah, I mean, everyone's just kind of doing their own thing, and I'll probably do something here. Like I said, first year I just kind of was going to focus on me, and then it became about Africa. And now that that's done, made a bunch of new friends here in town, because I still know a lot of people that, like, I grew up with, here in Richmond, who all saw me, years ago. But I also met a lot of people who've never seen me. So I'm like, yeah, maybe I'll do something, just to show them my chops,
Yeah.
But because I mean, with us, guys who are been doing it so long, I mean, you can never fully shut it off. We're lifers, you and I, and so you can put it in neutral for a little while, but you can never really shut it off.
Oh,
and I think if you can, then maybe career musician was not your preferred title.
I took a break, air quotes break.
Sure.
When my wife and I, well, I mean, we had our second child in a pandemic.
Congratulations.
And thank you. Well, when my wife became pregnant with our second child, I was like, man, I gotta start. I'd been on a break for about a year. I was like,
sure.
I'm like, man, I miss this. And I hop on, I think it may have been Nashville Craigslist or something like that.
Yeah.
And I saw a post for guitarist needed for Nine Inch Nails tribute band.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, okay.
Was it Not Your Nails?
Goes. And it was Not Your Nails. And
yeah. I didn't know you played with them.
Yeah, I played with them for a solid, 2, maybe 3 years, 2.5 years.
Man, then I definitely saw you.
Oh yeah. And we met the first time we met, Jim. You were playing with.
No, I forgot the first time we met.
I was with Not Your Nails, and you were playing with a Deftones tribute band.
Yeah, that night at Highwatt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. We're doing "Shake My Tomb," a tribute to Deftones.
Yes. And but what I was kind of getting at was that, like, John was able to kind of like give me license and was able to kind of like reignite that fire. I was able to play live again. I'm like, God, I miss this.
Yeah, it did it for me too. Coming back and doing Grunge Night, and I was like, yeah, this is pretty fucking fun.
So much fun. And the Grunge Nights that you put on here in Nashville, from my opinion and opinion of a lot of folks here, are absolutely iconic. And I do not use that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. We worked very hard to make it a cool show for everybody.
And you do. And if you haven't been to a Grunge Night in Nashville, you need to go. But one thing you will not see is the incredible work that Jim and Jack put in behind the scenes, especially when it comes to wrangling people and getting them on stage when they need to be on stage.
Oh man, yeah.
It's an art. It's a gift.
It is, man. I appreciate your appreciation for it. I mean, we have not only do we wrangle people, I mean, we have had people miss their song. It took until Grunge Night 8, but it did happen. A guy who I do know, he's a great guy. I'm friends with him. What happened was, for the first time ever, we ran early. Like, we had gotten the show so efficient and everybody had just got into lockstep that, we allot 2-minute transitions between songs, and transitions were lasting like 25 seconds. and which is great. But we were 15 minutes early, like halfway through the show, to the point where a guy comes back and he's like, "Oh, did you reorder the show?" It's like, "No," because he was hearing what song was on stage, and he's like, "Yeah, well, that means I'm like next." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's right." He's like, "But that's impossible, like, because I didn't hear like this song, or this song." I'm like, "Yeah, they happened." He's like, "Wait, what?" And then at the same time, we go up. It's Jeremy, Pearl Jam, and I'm saying, "Hey, so and so to the stage," because his friend had been like, "Yeah, I just saw him like 10 minutes ago. He was out smoking a cigarette, but I don't know where he is." And I was like, "Well, everybody's here, so okay, it's Jeremy, start the song." So he comes back in. He's like, "Hey, when am I up?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, that was you."
Oh.
But yeah, man, look, you guys, it's people like you who make my life easy. You've come through a couple of times for me, and you do such a great job. And people come in and they do their homework, and we have not had to deal with a true train wreck. I straight up did not learn this song. We haven't had to deal with that in a long time, because the people that do these shows and the people in Nashville, tend to take it very seriously. And, it's really great when, something you work hard to put on, everybody else puts in that amount of effort. And so Jack and I are very fortunate that guys like you and, the hundreds of other people who have agreed to do our show continue to do it. And, that's why we're able to get people like Daughtry and Lizzie to do it, because they come to the show and they see, all right, this is the real deal. So I'll put myself on the line and I'll go do it. And everybody has fun. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, like, we just want everybody to have fun, and everybody has fun, and it's a really fun time.
Nashville is unique in the fact that there never really has been. I'm a Nashville local. I'm from here. I grew up here.
Man, you're like a unicorn.
I know. My wife also a Nashville native.
What?
Right?
Dude, that is like unheard of.
It's insane. It's insanity. Absolute insanity. But there's never been a fully formed rock scene. Mm-hmm. And when you compare it to things like Sunset Strip,
sure,
Seattle,
yeah,
Orlando, even, 70s era New York, there just never has been, which is odd considering the amount of talent that's here. But the reason I bring this up is because I've been playing in Nashville for 20 plus years, and your event, the Grunge Night, was the first time I'm like, no, this is the community
yes.
that mm-hmm. I feel like I've been missing. So it was really cool to get to experience that at a Grunge Night and perform, but from a communal point of view where I'm like, oh my God, I haven't seen Mike since, I haven't seen him like a decade, or, and then they introduced me to so-and-so that I'm playing with tonight. And I'm like, this is what a scene should be like. This and right here.
What you just said is exactly what we wanted to have happen, because, we also loved, reading and, knowing about Seattle and even New York in the early 2000s, this just feeling of community. I'd never seen that before. And when I moved to Nashville, I think it was the first Rare Hair that I was a part of, that I was just like, wow, like you said, this is a community. Like, I've never seen anything like this before. And so being able to play some small part in that is really humbling. It's really nice. And, everybody, I mean, there have been bands that have formed because they played together at Grunge Night, It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. I love that I could help contribute to that.
Well, we have talked for an incredible amount of time, and I'm sad that we can't talk for another 4 hours.
It's okay, man. It's been a blast, seriously.
But this is my favorite part of the show, where I get to ask the guest, what are 3 actionable items that you would tell someone looking to get into the music industry, whether that's being a band, singer, songwriter, whatever you feel, positioned to talk about. What are 3 items that someone can walk away from listening to this show and enact immediately?
Okay. I'm going to give you items 1 through 3. And this is one that should be intuitive, but it really isn't. And it's one that cannot be underestimated, understated. Put this one in bold, italics, underline. go out and meet people. Like the amount of people that, it's like on Shark Tank, they say there's entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs. The amount of wantrepreneur musicians who do not go out and put in the work and go to where the musicians are and just meet people and just talk to people, like, yes, it's like dating. Nobody, it's sometimes weird at first to just be like, oh, hi, my name's Jim. I play music too. But like, you have to do it. And if you don't, you ain't going to go anywhere, because you're not going to find bands to set up shows with. You're not going to find people to co-write with. You're not going to find people to put on tribute shows. You're not going to find people to, help you, get your song on the radio or whatever. Like, it's just not going to happen because, it really does take a village to do what we want to do. And no matter how many people try and be 100% self-sufficient, eventually you do need help. And you need people who, if you got a gig and you're in a jam and, like, man, I wish I knew a bass player who could learn 12 songs like right away. Well, guess what? You're in Nashville. There's a million of them. You just got to go meet them. Like I said, I made an entire album with musicians that I met doing tribute shows, and there were some that I'd never actually met in person, but I'd done the show that they'd done and I knew people that they knew. And I could say, hey, I'm so-and-so's friend and they recommended you to me because, they know how good I am and they know how good you are and they thought we'd be cool together. Like, that is how you do it. And the rest of the stuff, hopefully, will just kind of come, as it comes. But I think you're never, this is, coming from a grumpy old guy, I feel like you're never going to make it out of the bedroom if you don't make it out of the bedroom and go talk to people. And I am blessed that, some would say I can talk. But my brother, he can talk to my ring light over here and make it do whatever he wants. He is so good at networking. So our show had the both of us, helping to grow that thing because we both just knew how to talk to people. And, I worked at a bar for years and I would talk to people about what I did and, shows that I was doing. And then that led, through a regular at the bar, he produced the last Ivins record, and he did it at his studio, and he's Luke Combs' monitor engineer, So I got to meet other people, and we got to meet people in his band. And when we got to meet people in his band, we had him do Grunge Night. And then, it just builds and builds and builds, It's all about who you know. And Nashville is so much smaller than people think. And a lot of cities, I think, with music communities are smaller than you think. And it just takes talking to people, and everybody can be better at it. I could certainly be better at it, but you just got to do it. So there you go. I cheated 1 through 3.
Awesome. Well, Jim, dude, thank you so much for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, man. This was a lot of fun.
And now a quick word from our sponsors. We all know the music business ain't easy, but it is simple. Learn exactly how simple making a plan can be from The Connector, Chris Keaton. This award-winning song plugger, management consultant, Recording Academy, and North Carolina Music Hall of Fame member can help you move the needle on your career. Email Chris at chriskeaton.com or visit his website at www.chriskeaton.com for more information. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Do That Music Thing podcast. To learn more about me, the host, Christopher Foust, you can catch me online at christopherfoust.com, on Instagram at chrisfaustmusic, or on Twitter at chrisjamesgtr. If you'd like to be a guest on the Do That Music Thing podcast, please feel free to email me at chrisfaustmusic@gmail.com. If you're a fan of the show, head on over and leave us a 5-star review. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris Foust. Let's go do that music thing.